Legends have a way of blurring the line between history and myth, and few tales capture that mystery more than the story of King Arthur and his sword, Excalibur. Some say it was forged by magic, others that it was pulled from stone, and still others that it was given by a goddess beneath the waves. Whatever the truth, Excalibur has become one of the most famous weapons in all of legend, a sword not just of battle, but of destiny. Today, we dive into 5 legendary facts about Excalibur, unraveling the myths, the mysteries, and the truths that lie hidden in the mists of Arthurian lore. But before we begin, ask yourself this: what makes a sword more than just steel? Is it the hand that wields it, or the destiny it carries? Fact 1. Excalibur was more than one sword. When people speak of Excalibur, they usually imagine a single blade, shining, radiant, and unbreakable. But in the oldest Arthurian traditions, Excalibur may actually represent 2 different swords. In some stories, Arthur proves his right to rule by pulling a sword from a stone. That sword is often confused with Excalibur, but careful readers of the medieval texts will notice a detail. The sword drawn from the stone was broken in battle. Arthur needed another blade, and it was then that the Lady of the Lake presented him with Excalibur. So Excalibur was not the sword in the stone, at least not in every telling. Instead, it was a gift of the supernatural, a sword born not from earth, but from water. This distinction reveals something important about Arthurian legend. It was never static. Each retelling, from the Welsh myths to the French romances, reshaped Excalibur into something greater. Sometimes it was the stone sword, sometimes the lake sword, and sometimes both stories merged into one. This duality gives Excalibur its enduring mystique. It was more than steel. It was the embodiment of Arthur's destiny, reshaped by the storytellers who carried his legend through the centuries. Fact 2. Excalibur was a weapon of incredible power. In modern retellings, Excalibur is often seen as indestructible, a sword that no enemy could break, no shield could withstand. But in medieval sources, its powers went beyond mere sharpness. Some texts describe the sword as shining so brightly that it blinded Arthur's enemies when drawn into battle. Others claim that its edge could cut through iron as if it were cloth. Even more mysterious was its scabbard. According to Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur, the sheath of Excalibur was more valuable than the sword itself. For as long as Arthur wore it, he could not bleed. No wound, no matter how deep, could cause him to die from blood loss. It was this magical protection, more than the sword's sharpness, that made Arthur nearly invincible. And yet, the scabbard was also his downfall. In some versions of the legend, Morgan Le Fay, Arthur's half-sister and sorceress, stole it and cast it away, leaving Arthur vulnerable at the Battle of Camlan. There, stripped of the sheath's protection, Arthur received the wound that would carry him to Avalon. So while the sword is remembered as a symbol of power, it was its sheath, often overlooked, that truly safeguarded the king. Excalibur was a weapon of might, but also of mystery, a reminder that true strength is not only in offense, but in defense. Fact 3. Excalibur was linked to otherworldly forces. Unlike many legendary weapons, Excalibur was not simply forged by human hands. Its origins are tied to the mystical and the divine. In some traditions, it was forged by the Fae, those mysterious beings who dwelled between the worlds. In others, it was crafted in Avalon, the Isle of Enchantment, a land where mortals could not go. Most famously, it was given to Arthur by the Lady of the Lake. Rising from beneath the water, she held the sword aloft, shimmering with supernatural light. Her presence tied Excalibur not to earthly kingship alone, but to something beyond the human realm. By accepting the sword, Arthur became not just a ruler of men, but a chosen champion of otherworldly forces. The symbolism here is rich. Water has long represented the boundary between worlds. the passage from life to death, from the mundane to the divine. For Excalibur to rise from a lake was no accident. It symbolized that Arthur's rule was sanctioned by powers greater than any mortal authority. His kingship was not just political, it was sacred. And in the end, when Arthur fell, Excalibur was returned to the waters. Cast back into the lake by Sir Bedivere, it was caught once again by the mysterious hand of the lady. This act reminds us that Excalibur was never truly Arthur's to keep. It belonged to the realm of myth, to forces beyond the reach of kings, to the eternal cycle of rise and fall. Fact 4. Excalibur was a symbol of rightful kingship. Perhaps the most important aspect of Excalibur is what it represented. It was not merely a weapon of war. It was proof that Arthur was the chosen king. In a world where rival lords vied for power and kingdoms fractured under endless strife, Excalibur stood as a divine seal. To hold it was to be recognized not just by men, but by fate itself. The sword in the stone story highlights this most clearly. Only the rightful king of Britain could draw the blade, and Arthur, though young and untested, succeeded where all others failed. This act set him apart, not by birthright alone, but by destiny. Later, when the Lady of the Lake gave Arthur Excalibur, it reinforced the same theme, that his reign was ordained, that his rule had supernatural approval. Excalibur became the symbol of legitimacy, of authority that went beyond crowns and thrones. In this way, the sword shaped not only Arthur's story, but the very idea of kingship in medieval Europe. A true ruler was not just powerful, but chosen, supported by divine or mystical forces. Excalibur embodied the belief that leadership required more than strength. It required destiny. Fact 5. Excalibur's story never truly ends. Arthur's legend is unique because it does not conclude with his death. Instead, it lingers in the promise of his return. After the Battle of Camlan, mortally wounded, Arthur was carried to Avalon, where he would rest until the day Britain needed him again. Excalibur, too, was not destroyed. It was returned to the waters, awaiting the moment it might once more be drawn by a rightful hand. This cycle of return gives Excalibur a timeless quality. Unlike many mythic weapons that vanish into obscurity, Excalibur endures as a promise. It suggests that true kingship, true justice, is never lost forever. It may slumber, it may wait, but it will rise again when the world calls for it. And so the sword remains a living symbol of hope, of power, of destiny. Even today, centuries after the first tales were told, Excalibur captures our imagination. We see it in films, in books, in games, each retelling, reshaping the blade, but never dimming its legend. Because Excalibur is more than just a weapon. It is the story of leadership, of sacrifice, of the thin line between human and myth. It reminds us that even the greatest rulers draw their strength not just from arms, but from the symbols they carry, the stories they embody, and the faith of those who follow them. So these are 5 legendary facts about Excalibur. That it may have been more than one sword. That its power lay not only in the blade, but in the scabbard. That it was bound to otherworldly forces. That it was the ultimate symbol of rightful kingship. And that its story never truly ends. Excalibur is not just steel and magic. It is destiny forged into a blade, and perhaps that is why we still remember it. Not because it was wielded in battle, but because it represents the eternal question. Who is worthy to lead, and what makes them so? If you enjoyed this journey into the legend of Excalibur, make sure to subscribe for more tales of myth and history. And tell us in the comments, which version of Excalibur do you believe? The sword in the stone, or the gift of the Lady of the Lake?